Hello and welcome to India Today. I am Sanjay Ponnappa, joined by co-hosts Maruti Acharya and Janani. Both are from different states. We are here to represent the diversity of cinemas in South India. We are going to be talking about everything that happened in cinema in 2024, starting with Malayalam cinema, which arguably had a lot of successes in the year when we compare it to the other industries in South India. With that, let's start the show. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you guys? The year has ended and cinemas have also ended
Hi
for the year.
Sanjay. So this year was actually mixed bag for me personally. Like I watched a bunch of Tamil, Malayalam, and Telugu films, a few Kannada as well. But then for me, this year was a mixed bag. Like whatever films that I expected to do well didn't do well, and the ones that I had like least expectations surprised me as well. Um, so coming to Malayalam industry. This year, I would say truly belonged to Malayalam cinema because it just kept belting out one hit after another, right from Premalu, Manjummel Boys, Aavesham, and even if you take the recent Rifle Club, Marco, even though they are not in big numbers, they're still like solid with the reviews and all that. So I would suggest that this year was a milestone for Malayalam cinema. Um, and similarly, the big budget films where it starred Nivin Pauly, whether it's Malayali from India or Malakote Valiban, Burrows, these are all some of the most expected films. With Malayali from India, they expected Nivin Pauly to actually have a good comeback. But then sadly, all these films did not find its audience and then failed to actually like rake in numbers at the box office level as well.
Okay, Maruti, what do you think? How was the year for you overall? Start.
Overall, this year was definitely a very unexpected year. That is from all the industries. Take Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, especially Malayalam for me, because Malayalam cinema, I have been personally rooting because I'll give you a small example about Jallikattu, how in PVR, when I was in Hyderabad back then, it had a very limited release and like what, 2 days or 3 days, but it was talked about and cinephiles are talking about the movie, so we wanted the movie to be released. So a lot of times with Malayalam movies, that is what happens. So this year, I am really happy because Malayalam movies not just success, it also got the reach. Not just in Kerala, people outside Kerala also got access to watch Malayalam cinema in theaters, and that reflected on numbers also, which gave hope to industry. So in that sense, I think it has been really good to Malayalam cinema.
Also, another thing to notice in Malayalam cinema is that how all the biggest hitters were all small budget films. Even if you take the likes of Aavesham, considerably a little more than the usual Malayalam films, but still, if you consider overall in Indian cinema, all these films are something that has a very small budget and yet managed to hit big. So, what's your take on this, Janani?
True, like all the small budget films, let it be like Parvati and Urvashi's ullozhukku, or there's this Malayalam anthology called Her. Even though it didn't have a theatrical release, all these films are all like rooted and then like made on a very concise budget. But then they went on to have strong content, which is why they have the reach as they have right now. And I feel this is also to do with the story and how they actually marketed it to reach out to the audience as well. Because films like ARM, which is Tovino Thomas's period film, like it was marketed as a pan India release, but then even though it had like many elements to like appreciate about, but then it did not have an overall. I mean, it did not come across as an overall entertainer, is what I felt. Same happened with Malakote Valiban and Burrows as well. Malakote Valiban was actually looked upon because it marked the first collaboration of Lijo Jose Pellicerri and Mohanlal. So it was one of the biggest entertainers that people expected to connect to, but then it actually reached out, but to a very niche audience and not to the entire mass audience as expected.
Well, Maruti, what's your comments on this?
The big budget movies that released this year were quite disappointing. I personally liked Malaikote Valiban. I really enjoyed the movie for the themes, what it is trying to do. Because in usual the pan India movies, especially when you take pan India, right, there is certain kind of template presentation. These are the tick boxes that the movie should satisfy. So Malaikote Valiban comes with a very unconventional point and a very psychologically hitting point that will make you think. And technically, visually stunning also, it has that packed theatrical experience. But that again, it is all about how you pitch the movie. I think not just in Malayalam industry, I see that trend in other movies also, especially all these pan-India pitch movies. Why are the small budget movies working? Is because of the way they pitch. From the get-go, they are made on a stringline budgets, and the characters are more relatable. There is more story for you to drive that film. But when it comes to pan India, right, it is very important for you to set the right expectations of what are you entering the movie. Because if you look at Malaikote Valiban's trailer or ARM's trailer, I feel like the promotional campaigns of those movies did disservice to the actual product itself. So you trained your, especially with Malaikote Valiban, the way they have hyped up the movie, I think that really backfired. The movie is not an underwhelming product, but because the way they've hyped it up is why you think it is something else. And because Malayalam cinema has been in conversations about not being able to give this pan India cinema and all those kind of conversations, they actually tried something unconventional. So again, those check marks were rejected by Malayalam audience because you have to understand what is the reason why there is a structure in that industry, right? So all these calculations went wrong. That's why I personally feel the big budget movies didn't work.
Another thing to notice here is that how all the films in Malayalam cinema has been getting more reach in recent times, especially after the pandemic. People have been raving about Malayalam cinema because of the many films that they produce, which is so content driven and content oriented. Even recently, we heard Anurag Kashyap speak about how he wanted to be in a Malayalam film and he managed to get himself one with Rifle Club. And then we also heard Mohanlal's interview where he said that it is a responsibility now that we produce good content because everybody is watching us and that the audience needs to develop this habit of watching so many films. So, Janani, you tell me, what do you feel about this phenomenon of Malayalam cinema opening up to the rest of the country and everybody having their eyes on it?
During the COVID days, that is when Malayalam cinema peaked for everybody, whether it's Fahad Fasil's films or Mohanlal films. Everybody, like, since they were all glued to the OTT channels, people were actually like opening up to Malayalam cinema. And this year truly like presented them such diverse films as well. Like you take the national award winning Atom, for example. It released in 2023 December, but then it didn't have a like that bigger release back then. And then when it released again in the OTT, or when it was re-released in January, that is when people actually like lapped up the film and then like understood how important that film was for women and for everybody else who are like working with women. That like that there are so many other films. So and I saw a lot of films this year, for example, Premalo, Manjummel Boys, Aavesham, and right now Rifle Club and Marco. These are all the films that actually like transcended from Kerala and had releases in other languages as well, concentrating on the dubbing because it needs to reach to another section of audience is something that I see as a big reach for Malayalam cinema.
Right. Maruti, what's your take on this?
Definitely, the attempts from the side of industry has considerably increased, and all thanks to OTT and stuff. There's a lot of talking happening about Malayalam cinema in general. So now what happened is that, see, with KGF and Kantara, what happened is that they were not initially dubbed into or released. So the talk and the demand for the movie is what created the release and hysteria, even Pushpa for that matter. So this has been the trend, and 2024 is the year for that break point of Malayalam cinema. So it's that break-even point where there is equal demand, and overall they created that impact that yes, even if our movies, irrespective of the language and the setup, if you release in your language, it will work. Looking at the demand and producers, I think this year distributors from other language also took that leap of faith, and then they took that step to release these movies, and that's how the results also reflect that. And another thing is Malayalam cinema, which not a lot of people are talking about, is the experience, the big auditorium experience, watching it with people. The cinematic experience is something that is very, very important for you to get the tickets sold. Malayalam cinema has figured out a niche way of getting that done. Not like a magnum opus experience, but like Sukshma Darshini is one such example. I would like to say that it is a very simple movie if you look at it. But trust me, if you watch it with audience in the auditorium, the experience itself is so memorable. So if you look at the Pan India movies and Sukshma Darshini, or for that matter, Bramayugam or Manjummel Boys, they are technically brilliant. 2018 is another example. So they are not exactly trying to replicate the existing model to building a world or something. They are giving their life, their stories only, but catering to the auditorium experience. So I think they've cracked that and promoted it well. I think that is the reason why they are able to reach this big. One more point is King of Kotha, for example. That is a proper, like, let's take a formula and make kind of a movie. So that didn't work. So the difference is evident.
While in 2024, Malayalam cinema made a lot of sound. Another thing that made even more sound nationwide is the HEMA Committee Report, again, arising from the Malayalam film industry. So, Janani, you tell us what's your take on the whole incident? How did it affect the film industry on a whole? What was the HEMA Committee Report?
So I'm not sure how much effect it had on the industry, but then like in terms of films, but then it definitely should have and must have had an effect on how the industry is functioning from within. So this is a very welcoming change that I see in the industry, because people are actually coming out, especially women, they're coming out with their stories and then saying no to the exploitation anymore, because this committee report actually exposed the many cases of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, pay disparity, casting couch, and then lobbying. A lot of what we might not think of Malayalam cinema looking at just the content that is coming out. But then this came as a shocker to many who actually don't follow Malayalam cinema that closely. But then this is one of the reports that will propel people to actually bring certain regulations in how the industry is functioning from within.
Right. Maruti, what's your take on this?
I completely agree with whatever Janani has mentioned, because the implications of it are something that we have to see on ground level. How much of the report coming out and the conversations that happened are really impactful on ground level, because there are a lot of interviews where actor has also mentioned, when something like this happens, there are repercussions also. Like, going forward as one way, and sometimes it might take back also, because the structure is such. So that is yet to see. But again, every time there's something like that, the conversation is the most important thing. And the SEMA committee report raised some important questions about a lot of things that are not just restricted to Malayalam industry. If you look at it, it is in every industry, every film industry, and every sector where people work. So I pray that it reflects on ground as well.
Yes, that was a really good point that you made, that how because of the HEMA committee report, it sparked a lot of conversations in all the neighboring industries as well, and how every industry wanted a committee for women's safety after this particular incident broke out into the big scene. And that again is a good scene. It's a conversation that needs to happen everywhere, because safety has been a point of conversation over the years for the longest time, but then it hasn't really gotten any particular conclusion or solution till date. So this is something that is very important, and that was a great point to bring up. While that was Malayalam cinema, fingers crossed for 2025. Thank you for joining in, and Maruti Acharya and Janani. With that, signing off for the year 2024, I am Sanjay Ponnappa for India Today.